Welcome to 2018. Humanity has unofficially entered the next space race with the launch of the Falcon Heavy, except this time we have a large group of competing companies instead of warring nation-states. The OG space race lasted for 36 years from 1955 to 1991, which is almost the entirety of the Cold War. However, the space race was a single instance of a larger and more subtle race, the race for technological domination. The space race was awesome and mind-blowing, but there was a complementary, absolutely ridiculous side to the technological race. A race so ridiculous it was one step away from a pissing contest. The Americans and the Soviets were competing in a digging contest. Literally. A race to the center of the earth. In 1961, the United States kicked off the digging race with an offshore drilling expedition called Project Mohole, located off the coast of Mexico with the goal of entering the mantle. The Americans really wanted a head start in the earth sciences version of the space race, just as how the Soviets had a head start in the actual space race. The project was eventually shut down in 1966 due to lack of funding. Thanks, bureaucracy. They did, however, gain several insights from the experimental phase of this project, which helped out in other drilling ventures, such as the then record holder for the deepest hole, the Bertha Rogers Hole, Oklahoma, in 1974. In 1970, the Soviets responded to Project Mohole with their own 15,000 meter deep borehole project. They planned to drill into the Kola Peninsula close to the Russian town of Murmansk. This is the Kola Super Deep Borehole. It is the current record holder for the deepest artificial point on Earth. In 1979, the drill surpassed the Bertha Rogers Hole, reaching 9,583 meters in depth. In 1983, the drill passed 12,000 meters and the drilling was paused for an entire year so that 1. They could conduct scientific studies on the site, and 2. To really rub their success in America's face. However, this year-long break had caused more harm than expected. When the drilling resumed in 1984, a 5,000 meter portion of the drilling column twisted off when they reached 12,066 meters. The Soviets could do nothing about it and so abandoned the broken column and started all over again from the 7,000 meter mark. In 1989, the drill reached 12,262 meters. If everything went according to plan, they would reach 13,000 meters in 1990 and 15,000 meters in 1993. But everything did not go according to plan. By the time they reached 12,262 meters, they realized that the crust was a lot hotter than expected. They predicted the temperature to be 100 degrees Celsius, but in reality, it was 180 degrees Celsius. In 1992, with better, improved temperature measurements, they realized that the temperature of the crust at 15,000 meters, their original goal, would be 300 degrees. Here's the problem. At 300 degrees, rocks become highly porous and permeable, which made them act more like plastic, making it practically impossible to drill any deeper. Not to mention the fact that the Cold War got over a couple of years ago and the nation was borderline bankrupt. Thanks, moon landings! In 2006, all the relevant scientific studies had concluded, and in 2008, the drilling station was abandoned. The Kola Super Deep Borehole remains till date as the deepest artificial point underground at 12,262 meters. This digging competition started out as, well, exactly that. It really is as childish as it sounds. But like any other technological achievement during the Cold War, scientists made a lot of interesting discoveries in the process. For starters, the project was really helpful to the field of geophysics. Till then, geophysicists relied on data from earthquakes and its waves and how they spread to try and model the interior of the Earth. Several theories that were simply on paper were finally verified with direct observations. The project also proved some theories wrong. For instance, a theory suggested that there would be a sudden shift in rock composition from granite to basalt at around 3,000 to 5,000 meters. Spoiler alert, they found no basalt. In addition to geophysics, the project had also contributed to paleontology by finding 2 billion-year-old fossils of microorganisms called microfossils, hydrology by finding a large amount of water created from water being trapped when the layers of the earth were being formed, chemistry by finding a large amount of hydrogen gas that were formed from the water being trapped under tremendous pressure and temperature. Along with the pure and applied sciences, the Soviets made major breakthroughs in engineering to get to where they did. They invented a brand new drill and a new method for drilling that is still in use. Just as how Project Mohole paved way for offshore drilling, the Kola Super Deep Borehole did for inland drilling. Here's where the story is interesting. The space race helped the human species go to outer space. Discoveries born out of the space race helped us build and launch artificial satellites, space probes that have seen the edge of the solar system, telescopes that have seen the edge of galaxies, space stations where people live, and a Tesla Roadster currently orbiting the sun. But here's the most important distinction between the digging race and the space race. The space race was motivated not by morbid curiosity or even ridiculous competitiveness, but by the idea of military dominance. The beeping sound you hear filled Americans with dread and fear. This was the signal that was transmitted by the very first artificial satellite, the Sputnik 1. It was launched by the Soviets in 1957 and it struck fear among the American masses. The fact that the Soviets used an intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, to launch a satellite was probably the reason why. For the Americans, the Soviets were announcing to the world that they had the capability to nuke anyone from space. Former US President Eisenhower declared that the technological gap between the Soviet Union and the United States was too wide. At this rate, he feared that the Soviets would gain military dominance in the domain of outer space. It was paranoia caused by this 83-kilogram aluminum ball that gave birth to the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, and the National Aeronautics Space Administration, or NASA. In other words, the entire space race was born out of military necessities at the time. It lasted for nearly as long as the Cold War itself. The creation of NASA was just as much about outdoing the Soviets as it was about building rockets that could double as ICBMs, armed with nuclear payloads should the need ever arise. On the other hand, you have this digging contest, which sounds a lot more ridiculous and is less likely to start a nuclear war. Of course, the space race allowed humans to learn a lot about the solar system, the galaxy, the universe, and our place in it, but it was even odds that the human race got wiped out. Oil drilling today is as special as launching a satellite. Anyone with adequate money and motivation could do it. The race to the center of the earth, while not born out of morbid curiosity, was a harmless pissing contest that gave us tons of information about the interior of the earth and the insights into drilling technology. It doesn't sound nearly as amazing as humans walking on the moon, but this is a good starting point, because it is kind of messed up when you realize that you know more about the galaxy in general than about the very planet we live on. But anyway, the space race is returning once again, and we can expect some incredibly exciting technological innovations in the next couple of decades. Of course, we can't go to the moon for the first time again, but at least this time, there isn't the threat of nuclear annihilation. Or is there? Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, consider clicking that thumbs up button and sharing this video. Subscribe to this channel for more such videos, and I will see you guys in the next video.